Have you ever felt like you're inside a game, but no one ever explained the rules? Have you noticed that no matter how kind, honest, or well-intentioned you are, the world seems to reward the exact opposite? While you hesitate, someone manipulates. While you trust, someone lies. While you let your guard down, someone moves ahead. This isn't paranoia, it's structure, a silent battlefield disguised as social interaction. And in this game, there are only two options: play or be played. But what happens when you study the rules with the cold eyes of strategy and the calm heart of philosophy? What changes when you read the 48 laws of power? Not to become a tyrant, but to understand them. Not to manipulate, but to avoid being manipulated. Not to dominate, but to stay grounded. That is the purpose of this video. In the next few minutes, you're going to embark on a radical journey. 48 days, 48 laws, 48 deep reflections between power and soul. Between Robert Greene and Marcus Aurelius. Between the theater of appearance and the silence of essence. We're going to show you one by one the laws that shape the world behind the scenes, and then confront them with the timeless wisdom of the Stoics. You'll come to understand how the world moves and decide how you move within it, because not all power is corruption and not all kindness is weakness. The balance between the two is where true mastery resides. Mastery over oneself. And only those who master themselves can choose not to be enslaved by the game. Get ready. This is not just another self-help video with pretty quotes. It's a compass, a mirror, a challenge, a call to awareness. With each new law, you'll ask yourself, am I in control or am I being controlled? And by the end of these 48 days, something inside you may have changed forever. Not because someone gave you power, but because you discovered you never needed it. Now you ready? Take a deep breath. The first move begins now. And on the invisible chessboard of life, awareness is your sharpest weapon. Law 1. Never outshine the master. The world is made of invisible hierarchies. There is always someone above, or someone who believes they are. Overshadowing the ego of the one who holds power is an open invitation to punishment. But is living in the shadows the only way out? Robert Greene warns us, masters are vain, insecure, and react like children when they feel threatened. But the Stoic does not play this game out of vanity. He plays for the survival of his own integrity. Marcus Aurelius would say, the best way to gain power is not to provoke fear, but to earn respect. True wisdom, then, is not in shining less, but in illuminating the room without making the light seem like it came from you. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. This law makes us uncomfortable. It betrays our belief in loyalty. But history is full of betrayals made by friendly hands. Greene teaches that friends tend to act emotionally, while enemies, once won over, act with precision. Stoics would say, the external enemy is irrelevant compared to the internal one. Epictetus reminds us that true trust must be cultivated within ourselves. The art here is in seeing clearly, not naively. To be cautious is not to betray, it's to protect, and sometimes a cold gaze is the greatest act of compassion we can offer to our own destiny. Law 3. Conceal your intentions. A predictable mind is an easy target. In the chessboard of power, revealing your plan is handing over the game. But is concealment the same as deceit? For Greene, hiding your intentions means controlling the narrative. For the Stoics, virtue lies in acting wisely, not in reckless transparency. Seneca taught, not everyone deserves to know what lives in your heart. Concealing intentions, then, is not deception. It's protection. It is knowing that not every truth needs to be spoken, and that there is a right time for every revelation. Serenity lies in knowing what to reveal, what to keep, and what no one will ever have the right to access. Law 4. Always say less than necessary. Words are arrows. Once released, they don't return. Greene warns that those who speak too much lose the aura of mystery and control. Silence, when well used, intimidates, seduces, commands. But it's not the silence of omission, it's the silence of presence. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "Even in silence I can think righteously." The Stoic chooses each word as one sculpts marble, with precision and intention. Speaking less is not muteness, it's letting the essential speak for itself. Because true power lies in the pause between words, in the glance that needs no explanation, in the gesture that says more than a speech. These four laws, when seen only through the lens of ambition, may seem cold, manipulative. But through the lens of Stoicism they become mirrors, mirrors that reflect what we have yet to master within ourselves, the fear of not being seen, the need for approval, the anxiety to explain ourselves, the compulsion to please. And perhaps, by facing each of these shadows, we not only play the game better, we play it less. And little by little, we leave the game with the dignity of those who chose not to be a piece, but awareness. Law 5. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. In the theater of power, reputation is the costume everyone sees, even when the soul inside is shattered. Greene claims that with a solid reputation, you inspire fear before you even act. And when it gets stained, everything you've built begins to collapse in silence, but the Stoic sees beyond applause. For Marcus Aurelius, reputation is like a shadow, always behind you, but never truly you. Virtue, not fame, is the real value. Still, the wise Stoic protects his image not out of vanity, but out of respect for coherence. He knows that a clean reputation opens doors, but it's character that decides what to do once inside. Law 6. Court attention at all costs. This is one of the most dangerous laws. Greene teaches that in the sea of mediocrity, being ignored is being invisible, and that to provoke, shock, and stand out may be more effective than trying to please. But what does Stoicism say about this hunger for attention? Epictetus would say that those who need others' eyes are chained to them. The Stoic doesn't shout to be heard. He is silent, to be noticed. He stands out through serenity in a world of noise. His presence speaks for itself. There is no greater spectacle than someone who acts with purpose while others beg for applause. Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. This one is the most uncomfortable so far. Greene outlines a cold logic. If you can harvest without sowing, then plant less and manage more. A thought that fascinates and frightens. The Stoic, on the other hand, does not despise work. He honors it. Seneca taught that nothing is more noble than to live according to your nature, and in that nature lies effort, sweat, construction. Yet even the Stoic understands the value of delegating, trusting, and leading. The difference lies in acknowledging those who helped you climb. Stealing credit gives you height, but never foundation, and sooner or later, the stage gives out. Law 8. Make others come to you. Use bait if necessary. This law is about magnetism, about not chasing, but creating a gravitational pull that brings others to you. Greene teaches that those who chase too much exhaust themselves. Those who attract rule. For the Stoics, the lesson lies in self-sufficiency. Marcus Aurelius would write that the universe flows toward those who are at peace. The Stoic doesn't pursue, he cultivates, and the force he radiates draws in what is meant to come. The bait, in this case, isn't a trap. It's your integrity. It's your calm in the chaos, your steadiness in doubt, your silence among hysterical voices, and that, when authentic, magnetizes more than any trick. These four laws confront us with a powerful dilemma. How far is it worth playing the role? To what extent can we control others' perception without losing ourselves? The Stoic does not ignore the social game. He simply refuses to be consumed by it. He understands that there are moments when appearance protects, when strategy saves. But he also knows that to live only to sustain a character is to die slowly from the inside. In the theater of power, the crowd may applaud the actor, but it is the quiet, honest backstage man who remains after the lights go out. Law 9. Win through your actions, never through argument. To argue is to try to win with words what can only be proven through presence. Greene reminds us that arguments convince the mind, but actions change reality. Stoicism echoes this principle with strength. For Epictetus, philosophy wasn't something to debate, it was something to live. The Stoic doesn't waste time in verbal disputes, he delivers silent evidence, because in the end, whoever needs to shout to persuade has already lost. Winning through actions is speaking the language of coherence, discipline, and resolve. It's showing, through conduct, everything the other tries to impose with rehearsed phrases. Truth, when embodied, needs no explanation. Law 10, infection, avoid the unhappy and unlucky. At first glance, this law seems cruel, but it carries an uncomfortable truth. Emotions are contagious. Someone else's chaos can become your prison if you don't know how to protect yourself. Greene warns that others' misfortune often stems from self-destructive patterns. The Stoic, however, does not turn away from another's pain. He observes, understands, and decides with clarity. Seneca taught that we should help, but never drown with those who are sinking. There is a difference between compassion and complicity in collapse. Closeness is not an obligation, and protecting your peace is also an act of love, especially when someone else's chaos begins demanding your balance as payment. Law 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you. This law reads like a page from a manipulation manual, and it is. Greene argues that dependency is the strongest tie to maintain power. But for the Stoic, true strength lies in freeing, not in imprisoning. Marcus Aurelius would never want someone to follow him out of need, but by choice. The Stoic leads by example, not by dependence, because power that relies on another's need is fragile, but power born of respect, inspiration, and autonomy, that is lasting. He who must always be needed lives enslaved to his own usefulness. The wise prefer to be valuable, even if dispensable. Law 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. This is one of the most dangerous and contradictory laws. Greene shows that generosity can sometimes be a trap. A gesture of honesty can dismantle defenses, not out of goodness, but calculation. The Stoic, however, understands that virtue must never be a tool for deceit. Seneca said, "True generosity is that which expects nothing in return." The Stoic is generous not to gain power, but because he is loyal to his nature. Yes, he may use kindness as a strategy, but never as a mask, because he knows that truth, even when subtle, carries more strength than any manipulation disguised as kindness. This block dives into the silent war of everyday life, where victory isn't about noise, but enduring the silence, where patience is the sharpest blade, where strategic isolation can be a trench, but also an abyss. The Stoic doesn't isolate out of fear. He withdraws to observe. And when he returns to the battlefield, he returns with clarity, because he has learned that often power lies in not reacting, in not explaining, in not being contaminated, in knowing deeply that you don't need to win every conflict, only the one within yourself. Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to self-interest, never to mercy. Robert Greene lays it out coldly. People act less out of empathy and more out of interest. If you want something from them, show what they gain, not what you suffer. It's a brutal diagnosis, but real. The Stoic, however, follows another compass. He understands that appealing to others' interest is not weakness. It's an understanding of human nature. Epictetus would say, "Don't complain that the world is what it is. Use it as it is." Wisdom here lies in acting with clarity. Instead of victimizing yourself or begging, show the path of mutual benefit. Not through manipulation, but through emotional intelligence. Because yes, there is more generosity in the world than we imagine, but it flourishes best when watered with purpose. Law 14. Pose as a friend, work as a spy. This law punches the gut of human relationships. Greene describes the hidden power of silent observation, strategic listening, social disguise. But the Stoic doesn't hide behind masks. He observes, yes, but with eyes of compassion, not of ambush. Marcus Aurelius would write, "Listen to all, speak little, judge less." The Stoic art of listening lies in presence, not espionage. Understanding another is an act of awareness, not domination. Those who listen to manipulate become slaves to constant vigilance. Those who listen to understand are free from the need to control everything, because sometimes knowing is enough. Law 15. Crush your enemy. Totally. This is one of the most controversial laws. Greene argues that leaving the enemy alive invites revenge, that only total destruction guarantees peace. But the Stoic disagrees. Seneca said, "Forgiveness is the most powerful gesture, for it frees the one who forgives. The enemy you destroy traps you in the cycle of violence, but the enemy you understand, or at least wisely ignore, loses power over you." The Stoic doesn't act out of rage. He doesn't need to destroy, and because he has already won within. And sometimes the greatest contempt is not reacting, letting time do what the ego wants to do now. The Stoic knows no one deserves that much power over your peace. Law 16. Use absence to increase respect and honor. Here, Greene teaches us the value of scarcity. Always being available makes you ordinary. Disappearing for a while makes you desirable. It's the old logic of emotional markets. What is rare has more value. The Stoic understands this dynamic, but goes further. Marcus Aurelius would say, "Withdraw into yourself often." Absence for the Stoic is not a tactic, it's mental hygiene, it's retreat to restore the soul. And as a consequence, this also generates respect, because those who withdraw with wisdom return more whole. Being away from others is sometimes the only way to return closer to yourself. And in the end, that is what impresses most. This block reveals the darker side of influence, the game of emotions used as instruments of power. Desire, guilt, loyalty, admiration, all can become currencies. But the Stoic doesn't play in that emotional casino. He sees, understands, respects, and steps back when needed. Because deep down, he knows that true power is not making others dance to his rhythm, but not needing to dance to theirs. Law 17. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Nothing is more frightening than the unknown. Greene explains that being predictable makes you vulnerable. Unpredictability breaks patterns, confuses the enemy, and forces others to respect you out of fear of what you might do. But the Stoic doesn't cultivate chaos. He cultivates the mystery of silent firmness. Marcus Aurelius didn't seek to be enigmatic, yet his unwavering consistency made it hard for anyone to know how to strike him. The Stoic isn't unpredictable by manipulation. He's unshakable through consistency. And this strategic calm, this inner peace amidst the battlefield, ends up seeming unpredictable, because in a world driven by impulses, serenity has become an act of rebellion. Law 18. Do not build fortresses. Isolation is dangerous. Instinct drives us towards safety, fortresses, walls, distance, but Greene shows that too much isolation weakens you. You lose touch with the world's pulse. You become blind to the movements on the board. The Stoic understands this deeply. Seneca taught that we need connection, not for approval, but for practice. Philosophy doesn't grow in a vacuum, but through friction. Real life is the testing ground of the soul. However, the Stoic knows how to balance. He retreats to nourish himself, but returns to the world to serve. He avoids the kind of isolation that paralyzes, but also rejects the kind of exposure that corrupts. Strength lies in the middle path, between silence and contact, between retreat and impact. Law 19. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. This is one of the most underestimated laws until it's too late. Greene warns, every person carries hidden triggers, unresolved histories, fragile egos. The wrong offense can ignite unnecessary wars. The Stoic acts like a strategist of the soul. He observes before acting. He understands others' limits to avoid crossing them carelessly. Epictetus would say, before you judge a man, understand the weight he carries. The Stoic doesn't fear others, but respects the consequences of his words. He chooses battles with precision, not out of fear, but emotional intelligence, because sometimes not reacting is the greatest show of power. Law 20. Do not commit to anyone. Greene defends freedom over alliances. The less you bind yourself, the more power you retain. But the Stoic sees commitment from another angle. He doesn't bind out of obligation, but chooses to dedicate himself. Marcus Aurelius said, everything we do must be aligned with reason and nature. The Stoic doesn't allow himself to be manipulated, but neither does he run from connection. He understands that authentic commitments don't imprison, they empower. The problem isn't commitment itself, but the lack of clarity in choosing it. And that's why the Stoic only commits to what echoes within his soul, because the greatest prison is accepting alliances that betray your own values. In this block, we see that true mastery begins within. The image we project to the world is only the reflection of what we can sustain alone, in the dark. A persona may open doors, but only real presence supports what comes after. The Stoic knows this. He doesn't perform. He lives with intention, because those who need to fake strength have not yet understood what it means to be strong, and those who must appear invincible have not yet faced themselves. Law 21. Play the fool to catch the fool. It's a cruel but brilliant law. Don't reveal your intelligence too soon. Greene teaches that by downplaying your mind, you attract confessions, expose masks, and unveil intentions. It's a subtle trap, appearing weak to understand the game. But the Stoic does not pretend to be ignorant. He chooses the silence of wisdom. Epictetus said, you don't need to show off. Let your life be the proof of your philosophy. But the Stoic does not place himself above or below. He stands outside the theater, and that's why he becomes invisible to the ego's gaze. He doesn't take offense at being called a fool because he knows there are follies that protect and egos that shatter when seen too clearly. Law 22. Use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. Surrendering to win may sound contradictory, but Greene shows that there are moments when yielding is strategic. To retreat is not to give up, it's to conserve strength. The Stoic understands this better than anyone. Seneca said, to yield is also an act of strength when done with wisdom. The true warrior does not fight every battle, only the ones that matter. And in stepping back he learns, observes, waits, because power at times lies in renunciation, not as defeat, but as an elegant detour. The Stoic doesn't fear surrender, because he knows the only victory that matters is the one where the soul remains intact. Law 23. Concentrate your forces. Distraction is the ruin of the talented. Greene warns, those who divide themselves burn out. True power comes from convergence, focus, single direction. And here, the Stoics shine. Marcus Aurelius wrote, do what needs to be done, as if it were the last thing in your life. The Stoic is a master of presence. He's not seduced by 1,000 goals. He honors one, but with his whole soul. To focus is a form of devotion. It is to turn effort into excellence, because scattered energy builds sandcastles, but focused energy carves mountains. Law 24. Be the perfect courtier. This law says, in the game of power, those who carry themselves with grace and intelligence survive. The courtier is diplomatic, charming, ambiguous, a refined actor in the palace shadows. But the Stoic does not pretend to be courteous. He cultivates virtue. Epictetus taught that respect is born from self-respect. The Stoic treats everyone with dignity, not for strategy, but for principle. He understands that kindness is not weakness, but controlled strength. And if the world expects a courtier, he will be courteous, yes, but without losing his integrity, because he knows that an elegant gesture may open doors, but it's character that keeps you standing after they close. This block is a journey through the human emotional maze, where traps wear the mask of manners, and the game demands emotional intelligence. But the Stoic moves through this labyrinth without haste. He doesn't rush to win, he walks to understand. And in the end, he doesn't exit the maze as a victor, but as someone who no longer needs the walls. Law 25. Recreate yourself. Robert Greene is direct. Those who don't reinvent themselves rot within their own image. The world changes, the context shifts, and if you don't change, you'll be crushed by your own permanence. But to reinvent oneself is not to betray who you are. It's to reveal what you didn't yet know you could become. Marcus Aurelius taught, life is flow, rigidity is death. The Stoic understands that identity is not a statue, it's a sculpture in progress. To recreate yourself is not to abandon values, but to update how you live them. It's knowing that each phase demands a different version of you, and sometimes the only way to move forward is to die to who you once were. Law 26. Keep your hands clean. This law deals with the ethical theater of power. Greene shows that leaders often stain others' hands to keep their own image intact. A familiar trick, acting behind the scenes while appearing virtuous in front of the curtain. But the Stoic doesn't play that game. He doesn't outsource immorality. Seneca said, conscience is the true judge, not appearances. The Stoic acts with responsibility. He accepts consequences and prefers to lose rather than win by dirty means. He understands that hands may look clean on the outside, but if the soul is stained, the price will be paid in the silence of the night. Law 27. Create a cult around you. This is one of the most dangerous and seductive laws. Greene advises, build symbols, mystery, enchantment. Make others emotionally dependent on your presence. Build a myth around yourself. But the Stoic doesn't feed myths. He destroys illusions. Epictetus taught that others' admiration is a prison with golden chains. The Stoic doesn't want devotees. He wants free thinkers. He doesn't need adoration. He needs coherence. He understands that real value lies in truth, not enchantment. Because the cult that lifts you up today may crucify you tomorrow. And what is built on illusion collapses with the first breath of clarity. Law 28. Be bold. Timidity paralyzes. Hesitation signals weakness. Greene shows that in moments of doubt, those who act boldly earn respect, even when they fail. But caution, boldness without direction is recklessness. The Stoic practices boldness with foundation, not impulse. Marcus Aurelius would write, do what must be done, even if afraid. And the Stoic knows that courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. He dares, with purpose, clarity, and ethics, because the boldness of the ignorant destroys. The boldness of the wise creates silence where there was noise, order where there was chaos, meaning where there was despair. In this block, we enter the dimension of time, how to use it, respect it, and master its silent force. The Stoic doesn't rush. He walks with firmness. He knows that time is not an enemy, but a faithful ally of those who act with intention, because in the end, time does not forgive those who remain still, but rewards generously those who dare to transform with wisdom. Law 29. Plan all the way to the end. Robert Greene warns, those who don't foresee the ending walk toward disaster. In the game of power, every move must echo the outcome. Every step must anticipate collapse or triumph. But the Stoic doesn't plan out of obsession. He plans out of clarity. Marcus Aurelius said, "Luck favors the prepared mind." The Stoic looks far ahead, but lives in the now. He anticipates scenarios not to control everything, but to avoid being controlled by anything. To plan all the way to the end is to accept that the future is uncertain, but your conduct in the present can shape it with precision, because those who act without vision become pawns in the game, but those who see the end choose how they will be remembered. Law 30. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. This is the art of disguise. Greene reveals that by hiding effort, you build an aura of genius. People admire what seems natural, but the Stoic doesn't seek admiration. He seeks depth. Seneca reminds us that virtue is silent but solid. The Stoic doesn't hide effort out of vanity, nor does he flaunt it. He acts with humility. If something looks easy, it's because there was discipline, dedication, and patience behind the scenes. And there's no greater merit than turning pain into lightness without announcing to the world how much it hurt. Elegance is making the difficult look serene. Law 31. Control the options. Get others to play with the cards you deal. This law is about psychological mastery. Greene teaches that by offering carefully chosen options, you give others the illusion of freedom, even when they're only choosing what you want. Is it manipulation? Yes. Is it effective? Absolutely. But the Stoic follows a different path. Epictetus declared, "True freedom comes from within." The Stoic doesn't seek to control others, he seeks to control himself. And that's precisely why he often becomes the gravitational center of any environment. Because those who master their own reactions, words, and values naturally influence. You don't need to limit options when your presence already redefines the game. Law 32. Touch people's hearts and win their loyalty. Here, Greene shows us a paradox. Logic convinces, but emotion connects. If you want followers, touch their souls. But the Stoic doesn't touch to seduce, he touches to transform. Marcus Aurelius said, "What comes from the heart touches the heart." The Stoic doesn't manipulate emotions, he shares his truth, and that truth, when sincere, moves multitudes. Loyalty born of truth is unshakable. Loyalty born of seduction crumbles with the first doubt. The Stoic understands that to influence is different from to enchant, because enchantment fades, but truth endures. In this block, we enter the social trenches where battles leave no blood, but leave scars, where the game is played with words, glances, and subtle choices. The Stoic walks this board with open eyes and a steady heart. He doesn't need to win everyone. He only needs not to lose himself. Because, in the end, the greatest influence is the quiet integrity of someone who lives by what they believe, even when no one is clapping. Law 33. Discover others' weaknesses. Robert Greene teaches that knowing someone's weakness is holding the key to control, to find the vulnerable spot, the open wound, the unresolved trauma, and use them. Cruel, without a doubt, but effective in the game of power. The Stoic, however, sees this law through a different lens. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The Stoic doesn't exploit weakness. He understands wounds, not to defeat others, but to avoid being a hostage to his own. He knows that true strength lies in embracing vulnerability, not wielding it as a weapon, because anyone who needs to lean on another's weakness has not yet built their own strength. Data 34. Be real but grand. Greene urges us to be larger than life, to craft a presence that impresses, commands respect, and leaves a mark. And the Stoic, he understands that true greatness is born from inner reality. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be like the rock against which the waves crash, it stands firm." To be grand for the Stoic is to remain steady amidst chaos, to stay consistent when everyone changes their mind, to remain silent when everyone is shouting. He doesn't need to appear great, he is, and that greatness is not measured in words, but in invisible deeds, because the Stoic soul doesn't need a stage. It needs purpose. Law 35. Master the art of timing. Knowing when to act is just as vital as knowing how to act. Greene highlights that the difference between failure and triumph can lie in mere seconds. The Stoic also values time, but with deeper wisdom. Seneca reminds us, it's not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it. The Stoic doesn't chase opportunities. He cultivates the inner space to recognize them when they appear. He waits, observes, and when the right moment comes, he acts with precision. His constant preparation turns every instant into a chance for virtue, because the Stoic is not reactive. He is surgical, and for that, time respects him. Law 36. Despise what you cannot have. Here Greene speaks of strategic detachment, of the power in denying desire for what lies beyond your reach. If something is unattainable, despise it, and it loses power over you. The Stoic lives this truth masterfully. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, if it is not within your reach, it does not belong to your world. The Stoic doesn't crave what is beyond his control. He is not frustrated by the unreachable. He transforms its absence into freedom. Because to desire what you cannot have is to willingly shackle yourself, and to despise with wisdom is a subtle form of liberation without conflict. This block is a call to build an empire no one sees, but that sustains everything we are. Discipline is not rigidity, it is foundation. Presence is not control, it is awareness. Truth is not argument, it is a state of being. The Stoic knows that the greatest throne is one no one can take, because it doesn't lie outside. It rests in the center of the chest, where peace lives in those who walk according to their values. Law 37. Create impressive spectacles. Greene unveils one of the oldest weapons of power, visual impact, enchantment, the creation of moments that dazzle and hypnotize. Kings, leaders, and empires have always used spectacle to dominate hearts and minds. But the Stoic is not driven by spotlights. He is driven by coherence. Epictetus reminds us, what impresses the eyes often does not transform character. The Stoic may create impact, but never as a disguise. His spectacle is example. The most impressive scene he offers is his composure amidst chaos, self-control in the face of offense, dignity in silence, because the greatest spectacle is being whole in a fragmented world. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. Here Greene presents a chameleonic logic. Adapt externally, but preserve your individuality in secret, a calculated invitation to dissimulation. For the Stoic, however, this duplicity is dangerous. Marcus Aurelius was both emperor and philosopher, and he never hid either. He said, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." The Stoic is not naive. He knows there are times to keep opinions to himself, but he does not pretend to be what he is not. He observes, adapts without betrayal, walks lightly between worlds without losing his core. Because in acting like others, without thinking like them, is only a virtue if it doesn't destroy your essence. Law 39. Stir the waters to catch fish. This law is about provoking, destabilizing, forcing reactions to reveal hidden intentions. Greene advises, when all is too calm, create chaos. The Stoic, on the other hand, dives into a different strategy, calming his own waters. Seneca said, "A man at peace with his soul is not shaken by external storms." The Stoic knows that provoking external confusion is risky, and that stirring inner turmoil is even worse. He fishes in stillness. He understands that the true fish of wisdom appear when the waters of the mind are clear. Stirring the world for gain may work, but serenity remains the best net. Law 40. Despise the free lunch. Greene claims that everything has a price, that accepting favors with no visible cost is opening the door to invisible debts. The Stoic would agree. Epictetus warned us against attachments that steal autonomy. For him, the Stoic should prefer dignified scarcity over conditioned abundance. Accepting all that is given may seem advantageous, but it's often a trap. What comes easily binds silently. That's why the Stoic cultivates self-sufficiency. He doesn't fear asking for help, but he won't sell himself for comfort. Because freedom is the highest good, and no price is small enough to be worth giving it up. This block reveals the subtle temptations in the game of power, the glitter of the stage, the convenience of dissimulation, the seduction of chaos, the comfort of favors. But the Stoic walks along the edge of these abysses with eyes fixed on what matters, not losing himself. He may play, he may even win, but never at the cost of his own conscience. Because in the end, what remains is what you refuse to trade. Law 41. Avoid following in the footsteps of a great man. Robert Greene teaches, to succeed a giant is to carry an invisible burden. The shadow of those who came before can swallow your identity. That's why you must carve your own path. But the Stoic does not fear comparisons. He doesn't compete with memories, but with his own principles. Marcus Aurelius was heir to emperors, and still he wrote, "Be like the rock, solid, independent, unshakable." The Stoic honors the past, but he is not chained to it. He knows that greatness is not about repeating deeds, it's about living with depth. And that means creating, not imitating, leaving a trail, not a copy, because living in someone else's shadow is to extinguish your own light. Law 42. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. Greene points to the logic of systems, weaken leadership, and the structure collapses. It's a cold strategy, but a functional one. Cut the root, not the branches. The Stoic, however, does not act through destruction, he acts through vision. Seneca said, "A strong man does not need to knock anyone down, he simply stands tall." The Stoic does not attack, he transcends. He doesn't seek to dismantle others, but to strengthen himself. And in doing so, he naturally weakens systems of oppression. The true Stoic doesn't destroy shepherds. He lights the way so the sheep may find their own legs, because power that relies on the collapse of others is the most unstable of all. Law 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. This law reveals the secret of lasting influence. It is not fear that sustains alliances, it is emotion, well cultivated. Greene explains that to win hearts is to earn loyalty, but the Stoic does not manipulate emotions, he honors them. Epictetus said, "If you want to move the world, move yourself first." The Stoic touches others not with tricks, but with presence. He convinces not through technique, but through truth, because he who lives what he teaches inspires, and one who inspires transforms. Power that comes from the heart is deeper than that which comes from fear, because fear paralyzes, but truth moves, and those who feel it stay. Law 44. Disarm and enrage with the mirror effect. Greene teaches that mirroring someone's behavior can disorient them, disarm them, or even make them explode. The mirror effect is a subtle and powerful weapon, but the Stoic does not provoke explosions. He cultivates mirrors for himself. Marcus Aurelius spent hours writing to himself like an intimate reflection. He sought to see his own flaws mirrored back, not those of others. The Stoic doesn't return aggression, he returns awareness. And sometimes that enrages more than any attack, because nothing irritates the ego more than being seen clearly. That's why the Stoic's mirror effect is not a tactic, it is integrity. He reflects what he is, and that is enough. This block reveals that the game of power has an end. But what remains after that? The name, the fame, the scars? The Stoic lives the present with the weight of eternity. He knows that every action builds a legacy, and that legacy is not material. It's a vibration, a memory. an invisible impact that echoes in those whose paths he crossed. Because in the end, it's not how many pieces you moved that matters. It's who you became while moving each of them. Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never change too much. Robert Greene reveals one of the subtlest strategies for maintaining power. Promote symbolic change while keeping the structure intact. Change just enough to seem bold, but never so much that it shakes the system that supports you. But the Stoic rejects this theatre. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is in constant change, and therein lies its harmony." For the Stoic, change is not cosmetic. It is radical, internal, real. He does not preach evolution to please an audience. He changes because stagnation is against nature. And unlike the manipulator, the Stoic is not afraid to transform so deeply that he no longer pleases. He prefers the truth that unsettles over the illusion that soothes. Law 46. Never appear too perfect. This law speaks of disguising your excellence to avoid arousing envy. Greene shows that apparent perfection attracts hostility because it wounds the ego of onlookers. And ironically, to survive, it's better to appear flawed. The Stoic, however, hides nothing. He simply does not flaunt. Epictetus reminds us that those who live to prove something to others have already lost their freedom. The Stoic does not fake flaws. He accepts the ones he has. Because he knows his mission is not to be admired, but to be whole. And thus, even when he reaches excellence, he remains humble. Because those who must appear smaller to be accepted have yet to understand that true acceptance begins within. Law 47. Know when to stop. Greene warns us, the greatest mistake of those who conquer is to keep going. Victory intoxicates, success becomes an addiction, and those who don't know how to stop at the top fall. The Stoic knows this danger. Seneca said, "Nothing in excess, even virtue, requires measure." The Stoic understands cycles. He is not obsessed with infinite growth because he knows that everything that grows without end rots. He stops, withdraws, reflects, is reborn. He does not fear the end because he understands the value of closure, because knowing when to stop is a form of power, and often the most difficult of all. Law 48. Assume formlessness. The final law is the most enigmatic. Greene teaches, be fluid, adaptable, like water that takes the shape of its container without losing its essence. Never be fixed, for what is fixed breaks. Here, the Stoic silently applauds. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The human soul is like water. It adapts to the moment, but preserves its depth." The Stoic is not rigid. He is steady. He does not resist reality. He flows with it, keeping his internal axis intact. He adapts his gesture, but preserves his values. He may change his tone, but never his substance, because true strength lies not in hardness, but in flexibility rooted in depth. In this final block, the laws invite us to see the game for what it is, a cycle. It begins with the desire to control, passes through conquest, and ends, for the wise, in conscious renunciation. The Stoic moves across the board without clinging to any one square. He plays, yes, but already knowing the game is not the end, it is the path. And so, while others devour one another for advantage, he remains firm, free, unshaken. We've reached the end of the journey. 48 laws, 48 reflections, 48 confrontations between the external world and the inner self. Maybe, along these blocks, something inside you stirred. A part that once believed power was only about influence, and now understands that the most absolute power is the one no one sees. The power not to react, not to depend, not to fall for illusion. Because the game of power, as Robert Greene describes, is real, ruthless, and effective, but it only dominates those who forget to look inward. And that's why, in each law, we left a Stoic mirror, so you could not only understand the game, but decide whether you still want to play it. Now that you know the strategies, the masks, the gestures, the backstage mechanics, the inevitable question arises: is it worth winning? If in the process you lose yourself, is it worth manipulating everyone around you? If the price is falling asleep every night at war with your own conscience, is it worth conquering hearts when yours has turned to stone? The Stoic doesn't stop you from playing. He only asks why, for what, at what cost? Because deep down, what Robert Greene unveils with his laws, perhaps without realizing, is that absolute power, without direction, is a prison disguised as an empire. Marcus Aurelius, in old age, surrounded by wars, betrayals, and titles, wrote in solitude, "Within you is the good. Within you is the source. Never seek outside what can only be born within." That's the essence. True power is not in dominating everyone, but in mastering yourself so completely that you no longer need to. When you reach that point, where your peace no longer depends on applause, your action no longer requires validation, your walk no longer waits for recognition, then you've won the game without destroying anyone, and now, perhaps, you face the most important choice of all. You can use these laws to become someone admired, feared, respected, and possibly hollow. Or you can use them to protect yourself, to observe, to understand, and keep living with dignity, presence, and soul. You decide. Because in the end, it's not about following or rejecting the laws of power. It's about deciding who you become by knowing them. You may leave this video the same way you came, but if something within you shifted, if a question was planted, if a veil was lifted, if a desire to be more whole was born, then this journey was already worth it. Power calls you, but conscience whispers, and those who learn to hear the whisper are never again manipulated by the scream.